The splinter was so small Marcus Grayson almost missed it. A dark sliver of oak buried deep in the green skin of the orc woman's palm. She had not mentioned it when they met at the disputed fence line that morning, had not flinched when she gripped the weathered post to inspect the water markers he had carved into the wood. But he saw the way her fingers curled inward afterward, protecting something. He was a man who noticed small hurts in others because he carried enough of his own, so when she turned to walk back toward the orc settlement upstream, he cleared his throat and said, "Your hand." She stopped, turned. Her eyes were the color of amber in sunlight, startling against her green skin, and her dark hair fell in a thick braid over one shoulder. Two small tusks curved upward from her lower jaw, no longer than his thumb, and her ears tapered to points beneath the practical leather band that held her hair back from her face. She was not tall, perhaps only to his shoulder, and built like someone who worked hard but ate well, all lean muscle and capable grace. "What about it? You have a splinter," he gestured. "From the post, I think. Let me look." Her expression shifted, something cautious moving behind her eyes. They had been meeting like this for 3 weeks now, ever since the stream that fed both his farm and the orc settlement began to dwindle in the summer heat. She was their water warden, responsible for ensuring fair distribution, and he was the human farmer closest to their border. Most of their conversations had been terse, professional, measured in inches of water depth and hours of irrigation rights. He did not know her name. "It is nothing," she said. "It will fester." He took a step closer, keeping his movements slow and obvious. Trust was a fragile thing on this frontier, especially between their peoples. The war had ended only 10 years ago, and memories were long. "I have steady hands." For a long moment she studied him, and he bore the scrutiny without flinching. Marcus knew what he looked like. A man weathered by 32 years of life, most of them spent working the land his father had claimed after mustering out of the army. His brown hair needed cutting, and his beard needed trimming, and the sun had carved lines around his eyes that made him look older than he was. He was not a man who smiled easily or spoke unnecessarily, and he supposed that was why she finally extended her hand. The splinter was buried deep, the flesh around it already showing the first signs of inflammation. He pulled his knife from his belt and she tensed, but he only used the tip to tease the wood free, working with the patient focus he brought to everything he did. The splinter was perhaps half an inch long, and when it finally came loose, a bead of blood welled up in its wake. He pressed his thumb against the wound to staunch it, feeling the warmth of her palm against his skin. "There," he said quietly, but she did not pull away. She stared down at their joined hands, at the small smear of her blood now marking his thumb, and something changed in her face. Her eyes widened slightly and her breath caught. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice suddenly formal, almost ceremonial. "Marcus Grayson." "I am Henna Farrow." She spoke slowly, as if the words carried weight. "Marcus Grayson, you have taken a wound from my hand with your own hands. You have shared my blood. By the law of my people, we are now blood-bound." He blinked. "I pulled out a splinter. You drew blood from my flesh and marked yourself with it. The blood bond is sacred among orcs. It cannot be undone." Her amber eyes searched his face. "We are kin now forever. What touches one touches the other. Do you understand?" Marcus had lived on the frontier long enough to know that orc customs were different from human ones, rooted in older traditions, in bonds of loyalty and obligation that ran deeper than law. But he had never heard of this. "Kin," he repeated. "Kin." She said it with absolute conviction. "I am bound to you by blood and you to me. I will defend you. I will provide for you. I will stand with you against any who would harm you. This is the way of the blood bond." He looked down at the faint red mark on his thumb, already drying. It seemed a small thing to carry such weight, but her face was serious, almost solemn. He thought perhaps this was some orc ritual he did not understand, perhaps even a strange joke, but the intensity in her eyes told him she believed every word. "All right," he said finally, and nodded once. "All right." She searched his face for something, seemed to find it, and then pulled her hand back. The blood on her palm had already stopped flowing. "I will come to your farm tomorrow," she announced, "to fulfill my obligations. You do not have to, I do." And with that, she turned and walked back toward the settlement, her stride purposeful, leaving Marcus standing alone by the fence line with a splinter in one hand and dried blood on the other, wondering what exactly he had just agreed to. He returned to his farm as the sun climbed higher, the heat already pressing down on the valley. The land he worked was good, 20 acres of bottom land along the stream, with fields of wheat and corn and a vegetable garden near the house. He had a small herd of dairy cows, a few pigs, chickens in a coop behind the barn. It was enough for one man to manage, barely, and it kept him fed and housed with a little left over to trade in the village 6 miles south. He had built the house himself after his father died, a sturdy log structure with a stone fireplace and a sleeping loft, and he had carved the life he wanted from this soil with his own 2 hands. But the drought was changing everything. The stream that ran through his property originated in the hills to the north, passing through the orc settlement before reaching his land. For years, there had been water enough for everyone, but this summer the rain had failed and the stream had diminished to a trickle. He had watched the water level drop day by day, had seen his crops begin to wilt despite careful rationing. The orcs upstream were facing the same crisis, he knew, and tensions were rising. Some of the human farmers downstream had begun to mutter about the orcs taking more than their share, hoarding water that rightfully belonged to everyone. Some of the orcs, he had heard, were saying similar things about the humans. That was why Henna Farrow had come to his fence line 3 weeks ago, sent by her elders to negotiate water rights. That was why they met every few days to measure the stream depth and calculate fair distribution. It was delicate work, made more delicate by centuries of mistrust between their peoples, and now apparently they were kin. Marcus spent the afternoon checking his fields, noting which plants needed water most desperately. The corn was suffering worst, the leaves curling inward. He adjusted his irrigation schedule, prioritizing the crops that would feed him through winter, and tried not to think about how much water he was leaving for the orcs upstream. Tried not to think about Henna's palm pressed against his thumb, her blood marking him, her voice declaring them bound. That night he lay in his bed in the loft and stared at the dark beams overhead, listening to the familiar sounds of his farm settling around him. He had lived alone since his father's death 5 years ago, and he had grown accustomed to solitude. His life was simple, measured in seasons and harvests, built on the reliable cycle of work and rest. He did not need complications. He did not need an orc woman declaring herself his kin, because he had removed a splinter from her hand. But when he finally slept, he dreamed of amber eyes and small tusks and a voice saying, "We are kin now forever." She came at dawn, as promised. Marcus was in the barn milking the cows when he heard footsteps outside, and when he emerged with a full pail in each hand, he found Henna standing in his yard, surveying his property with the same careful attention she brought to measuring stream depth. She wore practical clothes, leather trousers, and a woven shirt, and she had a large pack slung over one shoulder. "You are alone here," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "No wife, no children." "No," she nodded as if this confirmed something. "Then you need help. Your roof has damage." She pointed to the far corner of the house, where winter storms had torn away some of the wooden shingles. "And your fence by the road is leaning. I will fix them." Marcus set down the milk pails. "Henna, you do not have to, I do," she cut him off firmly. "I am blood bound to you. I will not neglect my obligations. It would shame me." She unslung her pack and pulled out tools, a hammer, nails, a coil of rope. "Show me where you keep your spare wood," he could have argued, should have, perhaps. But there was something in her face, a determination that reminded him of his father, who had believed a man's word was his bond and obligations once accepted must be fulfilled. And the truth was, his roof did need repair. The fence did need mending. He had been putting off both tasks because there were always more urgent things to do, and some nights he was simply too tired. "Woodshed," he said finally, gesturing. "Behind the barn." She nodded and strode off, and Marcus stood in his yard watching an orc woman prepare to repair his house, wondering how his carefully ordered life had become so strange so quickly. She worked through the morning while he tended his animals and his garden, and when he glanced up at the house, he could see her silhouette against the sky, moving with efficient purpose across the roof. She was competent, he noted. Her repairs would hold. At midday he brought her water and bread, and she climbed down to accept them, sitting beside him in the shade of the house. "You live simply," she observed. "It suits me. You have no one to share your burdens. I manage." She studied him for a long moment. "You are few of words, Marcus Grayson." "Yes." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, barely visible. "I will learn to read your silences then." They ate without speaking further, and Marcus found himself oddly comfortable with it. He had never been a man who needed to fill quiet spaces with conversation. Henna seemed to understand this, seemed to carry her own silences with equal ease. When they finished eating, she returned to the roof, and he returned to his work, and by evening both the roof and the fence were mended. "I will come again," she announced as she gathered her tools. "In 2 days, to check that the repairs hold and to see what else you need." "The repairs will hold," Marcus said. "Even so." She shouldered her pack. "We are kin. Your well-being is my responsibility now." And with that, she left, striding off toward the settlement as the sun began its descent, leaving Marcus to wonder what exactly he had become entangled in. 2 days later, she returned with a haunch of venison slung over her shoulder, rich red meat that would have cost him half a week's trade goods in the village. "From this morning's hunt," she said, presenting it as if it were a simple gift. "Your stores are low. I can see it in your face." He had not realized his face showed such things, but perhaps it was true. He had been eating sparingly, stretching his supplies as the crop struggled. "I cannot pay you for this," he said quietly. She looked almost offended. "You do not pay kin. This is obligation, not trade." So he accepted the venison, and she stayed to help him butcher and smoke it, working side by side with him in the small smokehouse behind the barn. Her hands were sure and practiced, and she told him stories as they worked, tales of hunts in the northern hills, of the careful balance between taking from the land and letting it replenish itself. Her voice was low and pleasant, and Marcus found himself listening not just to her words but to the rhythm of them, the way she shaped her sentences with the same care she brought to everything else. "You understand the land," he said when she finished a story about tracking a boar through 3 days of rain. "My mother was water warden before me," Henna replied. "She taught me that everything is connected. The rain feeds the streams feed the fields feed us. Disrupt one part and the whole suffers. It is why this drought troubles me so deeply." She paused, her hands still moving as she cut meat into strips for smoking. "The humans in your village blame us for the low water. I have heard their words." Marcus could not deny it. He had heard the same mutterings, angry voices at the general store complaining that the orcs were diverting the stream, stealing what belonged to everyone. "Some do," he admitted, "and my people blame yours. They say humans waste water on crops that should not grow here, on livestock that drink too much." She shook her head. "Both sides are wrong and both are right. There is simply not enough water this season. Can it be shared fairly? I am trying." She looked at him directly. "That is why I came to your fence line in the first place, before the blood bond. You are the first human farm below our settlement. If I can find agreement with you, perhaps others will follow, but people are frightened. Fear makes them stupid." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood fear. Had felt it himself, watching his crops wither, calculating how much food he would have when winter came. Fear was a powerful thing, and it drove people to desperate acts. "I will not fight you for water," he said quietly. "There has to be a better way." Something shifted in Henna's expression, a softening around her eyes. "That is why the blood bond chose well," she said. "You are a good man, Marcus Grayson." He did not know how to respond to that, so he simply returned to his work, but her words stayed with him long after she left that evening. The pattern repeated itself over the following weeks. Henna came to his farm every few days, always with some practical reason, checking the repairs, bringing food, helping with chores, but Marcus began to suspect the blood bond was simply her excuse. She would arrive in the early morning and work beside him until evening, their conversation sparse but comfortable, and he found himself looking forward to her visits in a way that surprised him. She was capable and competent, quick to learn the rhythms of his farm and anticipate what needed doing. She helped him reinforce his chicken coop against foxes, planted new stakes for his tomato plants, mucked out the barn with the same matter-of-fact efficiency she brought to everything else. And she never complained, never suggested the work was beneath her, though he knew she must have her own responsibilities at the settlement. "Do your people not need you?" he asked one afternoon as they repaired fence posts along the southern boundary. "I've told them I am fulfilling blood bond obligations," Henna replied. "They understand. This is sacred." "And they do not mind," she hesitated. "Some do. They say I spend too much time with a human, that I neglect my duties as water warden, but the elders respect the blood bond. They cannot forbid me." Marcus tamped down the earth around a fence post, troubled by the idea that she was facing criticism because of him. "I do not want to cause you problems." "You did not cause anything. I declared the bond." She looked at him steadily. "I do not regret it." There was weight in those words, something beyond simple obligation, but before Marcus could examine it further, she had moved on to the next post, and the moment passed. The stream continued to shrink. By late July, the water barely covered Marcus's ankles at the deepest point, and he watched his crops struggle despite rationing every drop. His wheat would survive, he thought, but the corn was failing, and his vegetable garden was producing only half what it should. The cows gave less milk because there was not enough grass, and he had begun supplementing their feed with hay he had planned to save for winter. Other human farmers were faring worse. He heard stories when he went to the village for supplies. Angry men complaining about orc greed, about water being diverted illegally, about ancient agreements being violated. There was talk of taking action, of sending a delegation to the orc settlement to demand better terms. Some of the younger men were suggesting less diplomatic approaches. "They will not listen to reason," one farmer named Thomas spat, standing outside the general store with a cluster of similarly frustrated men. "Orcs only understand strength. We should dam the stream above their settlement, show them what it feels like to go thirsty." "That would start a war," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe that is what it will take." Thomas glared at him. Or are you too friendly with them now? I hear you have one visiting your farm. That orc woman who calls herself Water Warden. The other men shifted, their eyes on Marcus with various degrees of suspicion and hostility. He kept his voice level. Henna Farrow is trying to find a fair solution. We should give her the chance. Fair. Thomas laughed bitterly. There is nothing fair about watching my crops die while orcs upstream drink their fill. You are a fool if you trust her, Grayson. Marcus did not argue further. He finished his business in the village and rode back to his farm, troubled by the anger he had heard. The situation was deteriorating faster than he had realized, and he wondered if Henna faced similar hostility from her own people. He found out 3 days later, when she arrived at his farm with a bruise darkening the green skin along her jaw. She tried to hide it, angling her face away when he opened his door, but Marcus had learned to read her small tells. "Who hit you?" he asked, his voice flat. "It does not matter, Henna." She sighed and touched the bruise lightly. "One of the young hunters. He believes I am betraying our people by spending time here. We argued and he became physical. It is handled." Something cold and hard settled in Marcus's chest. "How is it handled?" The elders reprimanded him. "He will not touch me again. But he thinks you are a traitor." "Yes." She met his eyes, as do many. "They see me coming here and they assume the worst. They think I am giving you special treatment, allowing you more water than your share because we are blood-bound." "Are you?" "No." Her voice was firm. "I measure the water fairly. I have always measured it fairly. You receive exactly what is allotted to the first human farm. No more, no less." Marcus believed her. Henna was many things, but dishonest was not one of them. "Then why do you come here?" The question hung between them. She looked away, out across his fields, and for a long moment she did not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. "Because I want to. Because the blood bond gives me an excuse, and I am tired of being alone with my responsibilities. Because you do not look at me and see a monster or a savage or an enemy, you see me." She turned back to him. "Is that not enough?" It was more than enough. It was everything. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he had been avoiding for weeks. He had told himself Henna came to his farm because of orc custom, because of obligation, because of anything except the simplest truth. She came because she wanted to be near him, and he wanted her there. "Yes," he said quietly, "it is enough." Her expression softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled fully, her small tusks catching the light, her amber eyes warm. It transformed her face, made her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with human standards and everything to do with the person she was. They worked together that day in a silence that felt different, charged with something new and fragile. Marcus was aware of her in ways he had not been before, noticed the way she moved, the sound of her breathing, the small gestures she made when she was thinking. And he caught her watching him too, her gaze lingering when she thought he was not looking. That evening, as she prepared to leave, she hesitated at the edge of his property. "Marcus, I need to show you something. Tomorrow, at the settlement, will you come? If you ask it, I ask." She held his gaze. "There may be a way to solve this, the water problem, but I need your help to make it work." He nodded once. "Then I will come." The next morning Marcus rode to the orc settlement for the first time in his life. It sat in a valley carved by the stream, a collection of sturdy buildings built from stone and timber, surrounded by terraced fields where orcs grew their crops on the hillside. It was larger than he had expected, perhaps 100 structures, and he could see orcs working in the fields and along the stream, their green skin bright in the morning sun. Henna met him at the edge of the settlement, and together they walked through the community. Marcus felt eyes on him, heard whispered conversations go silent as he passed, but no one challenged his presence. Henna led him to the northern edge of the valley, where the stream emerged from the hills through a narrow gorge. "Here," she said, pointing to a wooden structure spanning the stream. "This is our main sluice gate. It controls water flow to our fields and to everything downstream. It has been here for 40 years, built by my mother's generation after the war." Marcus studied the structure. It was well made but old, showing signs of wear and weather damage. "It is failing," he observed. "Yes, the drought has put more stress on it than it was designed to handle. We have had to adjust it constantly, and the mechanism is breaking down." She climbed down the bank to show him where the gate's hinges were cracking, where the wood had warped. "If it fails completely, all the water will flow through at once, flooding your land and leaving us with nothing. Or we will be forced to close it entirely, diverting everything to our fields, and you will get nothing." Marcus saw the problem immediately. The sluice was a choke point, a single point of failure that put both communities at risk. It needs to be replaced. More than that, it needs to be redesigned. Henna's voice was urgent. "Marcus, I have been thinking about this for weeks. What if we built a shared system? Not a single gate that one side or the other controls, but a channel that splits the water fairly before it reaches either settlement. Something that ensures we both get our share, regardless of who maintains it." He looked at her sharply. "A permanent solution." "Yes. Something both communities can trust. Something that removes the fear." She gestured upstream. "There is a natural shelf about a quarter-mile up the gorge. If we dammed the stream there and built 2 channels, one to our settlement, one to your land, we could measure the flow and ensure fair division. No arguments, no suspicion, just water flowing where it should." It was brilliant. Simple but brilliant. Marcus walked along the stream bank, his mind already working through the engineering. The gorge was narrow there, which would make a dam feasible. The elevation drop was sufficient to maintain flow through 2 channels. It would require significant labor, careful measurements, coordination between both communities, but it could work. "Have you proposed this to your elders?" he asked. "They will not listen unless I bring proof that the humans will agree. They believe your people will never cooperate with us, will never trust us enough to build something together." She looked at him intently. "But if you say you will do it, if you convince the human farmers to work with us, the elders will listen. I know they will." Marcus understood what she was asking. She wanted him to be the bridge between their peoples, to use whatever trust he had built in the human community to bring them to the table. It was a heavy thing to carry, and failure would likely make everything worse. But the alternative was watching the drought drive both communities to conflict, perhaps even violence. "I will try," he said, "but I cannot promise they will listen. You are a good man, Marcus Grayson." She stepped closer, and he was suddenly very aware of how near she stood, could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. "They will listen. I believe in you." He wanted to touch her then, wanted to reach out and trace the line of her jaw, feel the warmth of her skin under his fingers. But he kept his hands at his sides and simply nodded. "Show me the site you have in mind. I need to understand exactly what we would be building." They spent the rest of the morning hiking up the gorge, surveying the natural shelf Henna had identified. She was right, it was perfect for a small dam, and there was enough open land on both sides to dig the channels that would carry water to each settlement. Marcus took measurements, sketched rough plans in the small journal he carried, calculated materials and labor requirements. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious for 2 communities that barely trusted each other, but it was possible. "We could do it before winter," he said finally, studying his notes. "If we start soon, if both sides commit workers, the dam can be simple, just stone and timber to create a pool." The channels will take more time, but most of it is digging, and we have people who can dig. Henna's face lit up with hope. Then you think it will work? I think it can work. Whether it will depends on people, not engineering. Then we make them understand. She gripped his arm, her fingers strong. Together, we make them see that this is the only way forward. Marcus looked at her hand on his arm, felt the warmth of her touch, and nodded. Together. The hard part was convincing everyone else. Marcus called a meeting of the human farmers, gathering them at the church in the village the following Sunday after services. 20 men and women came, their faces weathered and worried, their patience worn thin by weeks of watching their crops fail. Marcus stood before them and presented Henna's plan, describing the shared water system in careful detail, explaining how it would guarantee fair distribution and remove the source of conflict. The response was not encouraging. "You want us to work with orcs," Thomas said flatly. "To build something that gives them control over our water." "They would not have control," Marcus replied. "That is the point. The split would be measured and permanent. No one controls it. The water simply divides according to the agreement. And who measures it? Who decides what is fair?" "We would, together, both sides." A woman named Sarah shook her head. "I do not trust them, Marcus. Orcs killed my father in the war. Why would I work alongside his murderers? Because the war ended 10 years ago," Marcus said quietly. "And because if we do not find a way to share the water, people will die now. Maybe not in battle, but from failed crops, from starvation, from the conflicts that will come when we are desperate enough." "There is enough water if the orcs stop hoarding it," another man insisted. "There is not." Marcus kept his voice level but firm. "I have measured the stream myself. The drought has reduced flow by more than half. There is barely enough for both communities if we use it wisely, and not enough if we fight over it. This system would ensure we both survive." The debate continued for over an hour, voices rising and falling, fear and anger and suspicion spilling out. But slowly, grudgingly, some of them began to listen. Marcus was known in the community, was respected for his quiet competence and his honesty. When he said the water situation was dire, they believed him. When he promised the shared system would work, they were willing to consider it. In the end, they agreed to send a delegation to meet with the orc elders, to see the proposed site and hear Henna's full proposal. It was not a commitment, but it was a beginning. The orc elders were equally skeptical when Henna brought Marcus and 3 human farmers to their council hall. The hall was a large stone building at the center of the settlement, its walls carved with intricate patterns that told the history of the orc people in this valley. The elders sat in a semicircle, 7 orcs of varying ages, their faces grave as Henna presented her plan. "You ask us to trust humans," one of the elders said, an old woman with silver-streaked hair and deep lines around her eyes. "To put our water, our survival, in the hands of those who warred against us for generations." "I ask you to trust a system," Henna replied. "Not individuals, but measurements and engineering that cannot lie. The shared channel will give us exactly half the water every day, regardless of who tends it or what either side wants. It removes trust from the equation." "Nothing removes trust," another elder said. "Someone must build it. Someone must maintain it. What stops the humans from damaging their channel to force more water through? What stops them from sabotaging the dam?" Marcus stepped forward, his heart beating hard. "The same thing that stops you from doing those things: self-interest. If either side damages the system, both sides suffer. The water stops flowing to everyone. We would be bound together by need, forced to cooperate to survive." The old woman studied him with sharp eyes. "You are the human who is blood bound to our water warden." "I am. Do you love her?" The blunt question caught him off guard, and silence fell over the hall. Marcus felt Henna tense beside him, felt every eye in the room watching him. He could have deflected, could have said it was not relevant, but he had learned that orcs valued directness, valued honesty above all else. "Yes," he said simply. A ripple moved through the elders, whispered conversations he could not quite hear. The old woman leaned forward. "And yet you ask us to believe you will treat us fairly, that your feelings for her will not make you favor our settlement over your own people. I ask you to believe that my feelings for her make me want both communities to survive. I cannot love her and watch her people starve. I cannot build a life with her in a valley torn by conflict. The shared water system is not about favoritism. It is about making peace possible." He met the old woman's eyes steadily. "I want a future here, with her. That future only exists if we find a way to live side by side." The old woman sat back, exchanged glances with the other elders. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Henna has chosen well, very well. We will send workers to help build this system human. But if your people betray this trust, there will be consequences." "If my people betray this trust," Marcus said, "I will stand with you against them. The blood bond demands it." That seemed to satisfy them. The meeting ended with tentative agreements, plans to begin work within the week, commitments to provide labor and materials from both sides. As they left the council hall, Henna caught Marcus's arm, her eyes bright with something that looked like wonder. "You said you loved me," she whispered. "In front of everyone." "I did." "Did you mean it?" Marcus stopped walking, turned to face her fully. They stood in the center of the orc settlement with people moving around them, going about their business, and he knew this was not the time or place for such a conversation. But she had asked, and he had spent too many years keeping his feelings locked behind silence. "Yes," he said. "I meant it." Her face transformed, that full smile breaking across it again, joy radiating from her like light. And then, before he could process what was happening, she had closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was brief, chaste even, just the press of her lips against his, but it sent a shock of warmth through his entire body. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. "I love you too," she said. "I have for weeks, since you agreed to the blood bond without question, without hesitation, since you treated me like a person instead of a thing to be feared or used, since you showed me that kindness and strength can exist in the same heart." She laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "The blood bond was my excuse, Marcus. I wanted to be near you, I wanted to matter to you, and now I find that I do." He reached up and cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "You matter," he said quietly. "More than I knew how to say." They stood like that for a long moment, the world narrowing to just the two of them, and Marcus felt something in his chest unlock, something he had kept guarded since his father's death, since the long, lonely years of working his farm alone. He had not realized how much he needed this, needed her, until she was here in his arms telling him he was loved. But there was work to do, and they both knew it. With a final soft touch, Henna stepped back, her expression turning determined. "We build this together," she said. "We show them what is possible." "Together," Marcus agreed. They began work on the shared water system the following week. The orc elders sent 15 workers, strong men and women who knew stone and timber, and the human farmers contributed 12, including Marcus and Thomas and Sarah. It was awkward at first. Two groups who had never worked together, who carried old grudges and older fears, but Henna and Marcus moved between them, bridging the gaps, demonstrating that cooperation was possible. The dam came first. They hauled stone from a quarry half a mile upriver, large flat rocks that could be stacked and mortared into a low wall across the gorge. The work was hard, physical labor that left everyone exhausted by day's end. but there was a rhythm to it that transcended language and culture. Stone was stone, mortar was mortar, and the need to build something solid created its own common ground. Marcus worked alongside an orc named Torin, a man of few words and enormous strength, who could lift rocks. Marcus needed both hands and a lever to move. They developed a system, Marcus using his engineering knowledge to position each stone for maximum stability, while Torin provided the muscle to set them in place. They did not talk much, but by the third day they were working with the efficiency of long practice, anticipating each other's movements. Sarah worked with an orc woman named Kira, the two of them mixing mortar and carrying water from the stream. Marcus watched them gradually shift from suspicious silence to cautious conversation, then to something that might have been the beginning of friendship. When Kira mentioned she had 3 children at home, Sarah talked about her own too, and the universal concerns of motherhood created a bridge stronger than any Marcus could have built. Even Thomas, who had been the most vocally opposed to the plan, found himself working alongside orcs and grudgingly admitting they were skilled laborers. "That one knows his way around timber," he muttered to Marcus one evening, gesturing to an orc who was cutting supports for the sluice gates. "Got to give him that." It was not much, but it was something. Small cracks in the walls of prejudice, tiny openings where understanding could grow. The dam took 2 weeks to complete, a solid structure that rose 3 feet above the stream bed and created a pool deep enough to feed 2 channels. The channels themselves would take longer, requiring careful excavation along precise grades to ensure water flowed evenly to both settlements. They worked in teams, orcs and humans digging side by side, measuring depth and angle, lining the channels with stone to prevent erosion. Henna supervised the measurements, her knowledge of water flow and her careful attention to detail ensuring everything was built to specification. Marcus handled the engineering, calculating grades and constructing the sluice mechanisms that would regulate flow. They worked together seamlessly, her expertise complementing his, and more than once he caught the workers watching them with expressions that ranged from curiosity to approval. "You two are good together," Kira observed one afternoon, standing beside Marcus as he adjusted a gate mechanism. Henna was upstream checking the channel alignment with a level. "You balance each other." "We do," Marcus agreed. "The elders have noticed. They are talking about what it might mean, a union between human and orc." Kira glanced at him sideways. "Are you prepared for that?" "I do not know what you mean." "I mean that if you are serious about her, about building a life together, you will be a bridge between our peoples whether you want to be or not. People will look to you as an example for better or worse. It is a heavy thing to carry." Marcus had not thought about it in those terms, but he recognized the truth in Kira's words. He and Henna were becoming a symbol, living proof that cooperation was possible, that love could cross the boundaries their peoples had drawn. It was indeed a heavy thing, but he found he did not mind the weight. "I am prepared," he said quietly. "If she is, she is." Kira smiled, showing her small tusks. "She has been preparing her whole life, I think. She is her mother's daughter, always looking for ways to bridge divides. You are the answer to something she has been seeking." The work continued through August and into September, and the drought that had brought them together began to break. Rain came in late summer storms, filling the stream and easing the desperate need that had driven both communities to the edge of conflict. But they did not stop building. The shared water system was no longer just about surviving the drought. It had become something more important. It was a statement, a commitment, a foundation for the future. By the time the autumn equinox arrived, the channels were complete. 2 perfect stone-lined waterways carrying the stream's flow in equal measure to both settlements, with sluice gates that could be adjusted based on need, but which defaulted to a fair 50-50 split. Marcus and Henna stood at the dam on the day they opened the gates for the first time, watching water pour into both channels, flowing freely toward both communities. "It works," Henna said, her voice full of wonder and relief. "It does." Marcus put his arm around her shoulders, felt her lean into him. "You did this. You found the solution." "We did this," she corrected. "I had the idea, but you made it real. You convinced your people to trust mine. You built the bridge." Behind them, workers from both communities gathered to watch the water flow, orc and human standing side by side, sharing in the success. There were smiles, even some laughter, and Marcus heard Torrin say something to Thomas that made the human farmer chuckle. Small moments, simple connections, but they were the foundation of something larger. The elders from both communities held a joint meeting the following week, ratifying the water sharing agreement and establishing a council to maintain the system. 3 orcs and 3 humans would oversee the channels, inspect them regularly, handle any disputes that arose. It was an unprecedented level of cooperation, and Marcus knew it was fragile, could still fail if either side lost faith. But it was a beginning. That evening, as the meeting broke up and people began to disperse, the old orc woman elder approached Marcus. "You have done well, Marcus Grayson. You have honored the blood bond and served both our peoples. Thank you, elder. There is one more thing." She glanced at Henna, who stood nearby talking with her fellow orcs. "Our water warden has declared herself in love with you. You have said the same in return. What are your intentions?" It was, Marcus realized, the orcish equivalent of a father asking if his intentions were honorable. He met the old woman's eyes steadily. "I intend to ask her to marry me if she will have me." The elder's expression softened. "She will have you, but know this. If you marry her, you marry into our community as well. You will be one of us in the eyes of our law, subject to our customs and our protections. You will no longer be just human. You will be family." Can you accept that? Marcus thought about his quiet farm, his simple life, the solitude he had grown accustomed to. Then he thought about Henna's smile, her competence and her kindness, the way she had changed his world simply by pulling a splinter from her palm. He thought about a future where he was not alone, where he was part of something larger than himself. "I can accept that," he said. "I want that." The old woman nodded, satisfied. "Then you have our blessing. Make your blood bond a true bond. Give us a wedding to celebrate." Marcus asked Henna to marry him 3 days later, standing at the dam they had built together as the sun set over the valley. He did not have a ring. He would commission one from the smith in the village later, but he had words he had been practicing in his head for days. "Henna," he began, then stopped, realizing he was about to make a long speech when what he needed to say was simple. He started again. "I love you. I want to build a life with you here in this valley, bridging our peoples the way we bridged this stream. Will you marry me?" She laughed, bright and happy. "Yes. I have been waiting for you to ask. Yes, Marcus Grayson, I will marry you. I will bind myself to you in every way our peoples recognize. Blood bound and heart bound and soul bound. Yes." He kissed her then, properly, deeply, pouring every feeling he had kept locked away into the contact. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a long, perfect moment, there was nothing in the world except the two of them, and the water flowing behind them and the future opening up like dawn. They planned the wedding for the harvest festival, a joint celebration between the two communities that would mark not just their union but the successful first season of shared water. Both settlements contributed to the preparations, humans and orcs working together to build a pavilion near the dam, to prepare food and drink, to create decorations that honored both cultures. Marcus cleaned and repaired his house, knowing Henna would be moving in after the wedding. He built an addition to the bedroom, expanded the kitchen, planted a new garden that could feed 2 people through the winter. She brought her possessions from the settlement gradually, little things that began to fill his house with her presence. Books about water management and history, tools for her work as warden, small carved figures her mother had made. They were building a life together one piece at a time, and Marcus found joy in every small domestic task. He had not realized how empty his house had been until she began to fill it, how quiet his days had been until he had someone to share them with. The night before the wedding, as Marcus worked late repairing a chair for the house, he heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find Torin standing in the darkness, the big orc looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to tell you something," Torin said without preamble. "Before tomorrow, I fought against humans in the war, killed some, hated all of you. When the elders said we would work on this water system with your kind, I almost refused." Marcus waited, sensing there was more. "But then I saw you work," Torin continued. "Saw how you treated Henna, how you talked to us without fear or hatred, how you listened when we spoke, considered our ideas, and I realized you were just a man. Not a monster, not an enemy, just a man trying to survive like I am trying to survive." He paused. "You changed my mind about humans. Not all of them, maybe, but enough, and I wanted you to know that, wanted to say that I am glad you are marrying Henna. She deserves happiness, and I think you will give it to her." Marcus felt something tight in his throat. "Thank you, Torin. That means more than I can say." The big orc nodded once, then turned and walked back into the darkness, leaving Marcus standing in his doorway with a profound sense of hope. If he and Henna could change even one mind, could bridge even one gap, perhaps there was a chance for lasting peace. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the autumn air crisp and the leaves beginning to turn gold on the hillsides. The pavilion near the dam was packed with people. Easily 100 humans and orcs gathered together, the largest joint gathering anyone could remember. There were still tensions, still sidelong glances and wary postures, but there was also laughter, conversation, a tentative willingness to share space and celebrate together. Henna wore a dress woven from green and brown fabric that brought out the richness of her skin, with her dark hair braided and wound with autumn flowers. She was beautiful, radiant with joy, and when Marcus saw her walking toward him across the pavilion, he felt his breath catch. He wore his best clothes, simple but clean, and he stood beside the old orc woman elder who would perform the ceremony alongside the human minister from the village church. The ceremony itself blended traditions from both cultures. The minister spoke of love and commitment, of 2 becoming one in the eyes of God, while the orc elder spoke of the blood bond becoming a soul bond, of 2 lives woven together by choice and honor. Henna and Marcus exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to stand together through whatever came, to be each other's strength and comfort and home. And then came the final ritual, unique to this wedding, this moment. The old elder took a small knife and made a careful cut across Marcus's palm, then did the same to Henna's. She pressed their hands together, binding them with a strip of cloth, their blood mingling as it had that first day by the fence line. "You are blood-bound," the elder intoned. "As you were from the beginning by chance and choice. And now you are hand-bound, heart-bound, soul-bound. What you have joined, let no one divide. Let your union be a bridge between our peoples, a sign that peace is possible, that love is stronger than fear." The gathered crowd erupted in cheers, human and orc voices rising together, and Marcus pulled Henna close and kissed her as their bound hands rested between them. Their scars pressed palm to palm. The feast that followed was abundant, both communities contributing food and drink. Long tables laden with roasted meat and fresh bread and vegetables from the successful autumn harvest that the shared water had made possible. People ate and drank and told stories, and slowly, gradually, the barriers between orc and human began to dissolve. Not completely, that would take more time, more effort, but enough that Marcus saw orcs and humans sitting together, talking and laughing, finding common ground in shared experience. As the sun set, and the feast continued by lantern light, Henna pulled Marcus away from the crowd, leading him to the dam where they had first planned this whole system, where he had asked her to marry him. They stood side by side looking at the water flowing through two channels, equal and fair, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. "We did it," she said softly. "We built something that will last." "We did," Marcus agreed. "Together. Do you think it will hold?" "The peace between our peoples. I think it will be hard. I think there will be setbacks and challenges, but I think we gave them a foundation, something to build on." He turned to face her, took both her hands in his. "And I think as long as we stand together, as long as we keep showing them what is possible, there is hope." She smiled up at him, her amber eyes reflecting lantern light. "I love you, Marcus Grayson. My blood bound, my heart bound, my husband." "I love you, Henna Grayson," he replied, using her new name, the human name she had chosen to take. "My wife." They kissed again, soft and sweet, and the sound of celebration rose behind them, humans and orcs together, proving that bridges could be built, that wounds could heal, that love was indeed stronger than fear. Marcus and Henna returned to his farm, their farm now after the wedding, and they fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. The work of managing a farm had not changed, but everything else had. There was someone to talk to over breakfast, someone to help with the evening chores, someone to warm his bed at night. Henna brought her skills as water warden to managing their irrigation, improved his systems, taught him techniques for water conservation she had learned from her mother. Marcus taught her about animal husbandry, about crop rotation, about the 100 small details of running a successful farm. They were partners in every sense of the word, and Marcus had never been happier. Word of their marriage spread beyond the valley, carried by traders and travelers, and it sparked both hope and controversy. Some saw it as a beautiful symbol of reconciliation, proof that the war was truly over. Others saw it as betrayal, humans cavorting with the enemy, orcs diluting their blood with inferior stock. But in the valley itself, among the people who worked the shared water system, who saw Marcus and Henna together every day, the marriage was simply accepted as fact. Through that winter, Marcus and Henna worked with the Water Council to plan improvements for the following year, to establish rules for maintenance and dispute resolution, to ensure the system they had built would outlast them. They also worked quietly to strengthen connections between the communities, hosting joint gatherings, encouraging trade, facilitating friendships that grew slowly but steadily. Spring came, and with it, the planting season, and the shared water system proved its worth when early rains were followed by a dry spell that could have endangered crops. The channels delivered water reliably to both settlements, the carefully measured flow ensuring no one went without. There were no arguments, no accusations of theft or hoarding. The system worked as designed, removing the source of conflict, and both communities' crops flourished. That summer, Henna discovered she was pregnant. She told Marcus one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over their fields, and he felt joy so profound it was almost painful. A child, their child, a living symbol of everything they had built together. "Are you frightened?" she asked, her hand resting on her still flat belly. Terrified, Marcus admitted. I do not know anything about raising children. Neither do I, she laughed. We will learn together, just like everything else. The pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated, and Henna continued her work as water warden through the summer and autumn, only stepping back in the final weeks before the birth. The human midwife from the village and an orc healer both attended the birth on a cold December night, working together to bring a squalling baby girl into the world. She had green skin like her mother, but lighter, a soft sage color that suggested her mixed heritage. Her eyes were dark, her hair black and soft as down, and she had tiny pointed ears and the smallest suggestion of tusks. Marcus held her for the first time and felt something in him shift permanently, a fierce protective love that dwarfed everything he had felt before. What should we call her? Henna asked, exhausted but glowing. They had discussed names for weeks, trying to find something that honored both cultures. Marcus looked down at his daughter, at this tiny perfect person who represented hope and possibility, and said, Zara. It means princess in the old human tongue, and it sounds beautiful in Orcish. Zara, Henna repeated, testing it. Zara Grayson. Yes, it is perfect. They brought their daughter home to the farm, and the valley celebrated with them. Gifts arrived from both communities, practical things like clothes and blankets, but also symbols of acceptance and hope. The old orc woman elder came to bless the child in the orcish tradition, and the human minister came to baptize her. Zara was welcomed by both peoples, claimed by both, and Marcus saw in her the future he and Henna had been building toward all along. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were still people in both communities who resented the orc-human union, who saw Zara as an abomination rather than a blessing. There were disputes over water even with the shared system, arguments about maintenance and responsibility that sometimes grew heated. But Marcus and Henna faced every challenge together, their partnership strong enough to weather any storm. The shared water system became the model for other joint projects. A shared market was established at the border between the settlements, where orcs and humans could trade freely. A shared school was built for the valley's children, where both human and orc youngsters learned together. Slowly, year by year, the two communities grew closer, the wall of prejudice and fear eroding under the steady pressure of daily cooperation. Marcus watched his daughter grow, watched her play with both orc and human children, watched her learn both languages and both cultures. She was comfortable in both worlds, belonging to neither exclusively, and somehow belonging to both. She was, he realized, the first of a new generation that would not remember the war, that would not carry the old hatreds. She was the future they had fought for. When Zara was 3 years old, Henna stood with Marcus at the dam as they did every year on their anniversary, looking at the water flowing through the twin channels. The system had expanded now, with additional channels feeding more farms, supporting more families, binding the valley together with a web of shared resources and shared responsibility. You ever regret it? Henna asked, though her tone suggested she knew the answer. Regret pulling a splinter from your hand, Marcus smiled. Never. That splinter gave me everything. You, Zara, this life. I am the luckiest man alive. She pressed her palm to his, their old scars aligned, the mark of the blood bond that had started everything. I invented it, you know. The blood bond. It is not really an orc law. I saw you standing there at the fence line, kind and steady and lonely, and I wanted an excuse to see you again, so I made one up. Marcus stared at her, then laughed, deep and genuine. You invented a sacred ritual. It is sacred now, she said defensively, because we made it real, because we honored it, because our life together has proved it was never really about the splinter or the blood. It was about two people choosing each other, choosing to build something together. She smiled up at him. So yes, I invented it, but you made it true. He kissed her then, there by the water they had shared, in the valley they had united, with their daughter playing nearby and the future stretching bright before them. The man had pulled a splinter from the orc woman's palm, and she had declared them blood bound by her law. And in the end, that invented ritual had changed everything. The blood bond was real because they had made it real, had lived it every day, had proved that love and commitment and shared purpose could build bridges stronger than any fear. And Marcus knew, standing there with Henna in his arms and Zara's laughter echoing across the water, that he would choose this life, this woman, this bond, every single day for the rest of his days. Their story became legend in the valley, told and retold by both orcs and humans, the tale of how a tiny splinter and a made-up ritual had grown into something profound and lasting. Children learned about the blood bond in school, about how choosing connection over division could change the world. And every year on the anniversary of the wedding, both communities gathered at the dam to celebrate not just Marcus and Henna, but the peace they had built together, the future they had made possible. Marcus Grayson had been a quiet man who wanted a simple life, and Henna Farrow had been a lonely water warden looking for connection. Together, they had become something more than either of them could have been alone. They had become a bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope, a living testament to the power of choosing love over fear. And it all started with a splinter. The years continued to pass in the valley, each season bringing new growth and new challenges. Marcus and Henna's farm prospered, their fields watered by the shared system they had helped create, their barn filled with healthy livestock, their home filled with love. Zara grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions about everything she saw, and both parents delighted in teaching her about the world. By the time she was 5, Zara could identify every plant in the garden, could help feed the chickens and collect eggs, could recite the water measurement formulas Henna used in her work as warden. She was also learning to read from both human and orc texts, her education drawing from both traditions, making her something unique in the valley, a child who truly belonged to both peoples. Other mixed couples began to form in the valley, encouraged by Marcus and Henna's success. It was still uncommon, still sometimes controversial, but it was no longer unthinkable. A human woman married an orc man who worked the quarry. An orc woman took a human farmer as her partner. Each new union strengthened the bonds between the communities, created new connections that were harder to sever. The Water Council had expanded to include representatives from farms and settlements throughout the region, and Henna had become its chief administrator, her expertise and her fairness making her the natural choice to oversee the growing network of shared resources. Marcus served as the council's chief engineer, designing new channels and irrigation systems, traveling to other valleys to help communities implement similar sharing agreements. They were busy, both of them, but they always made time for each other and for Zara. Family dinners were sacred, evenings spent together on the porch were inviolable, and Sunday mornings were reserved for sleeping late and lazy breakfasts and playing with their daughter. They had built not just a life but a home, and they protected it fiercely. When Zara was 7, a drought returned to the valley, not as severe as the one that had brought Marcus and Henna together, but significant enough to test the shared water system. The stream level dropped steadily through the summer, and tensions began to rise as both communities watched their crops struggle. There were calls to divert more water to human farms, counter-calls to prioritize orc fields, angry voices demanding special treatment. Marcus and Henna stood before the Water Council and presented a unified plan. Strict rationing for everyone, no exceptions, with careful monitoring to ensure the system remained fair. It was not what anyone wanted to hear. Everyone wanted more water, not less, but it was what the situation required. The council voted to implement their plan, and for 6 weeks, the valley operated under severe water restrictions. There were complaints, of course, and accusations that certain farms were cheating, taking more than their share. But the monitoring system Marcus had designed made it difficult to hide violations, and the few who tried were caught and penalized equally, regardless of whether they were human or orc. The message was clear. The rules applied to everyone, and the system was more important than any individual's desire for advantage. The rains finally came in late August, heavy storms that filled the stream and saved the harvest. Both communities had suffered losses, but both had survived, and the shared system had held. More importantly, the drought had proved that the valley could face crisis together without falling into conflict. They had been tested and found strong. After that summer, opposition to the shared water system largely disappeared. There would always be a few who resented cooperation between humans and orcs, who clung to old prejudices, but they became an increasingly small minority. The valley as a whole had moved forward, had accepted that their futures were intertwined, that they would thrive or fail together. Marcus and Henna celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary that autumn with a simple gathering at their farm, close friends from both communities joining them for a feast. The old orc woman elder who had married them was there, now showing her age but still sharp and observant. She pulled Marcus aside at one point, her weathered hand gripping his arm. "You have done well," she said. "Both of you, you have given us something rare and precious, proof that peace is possible. Do not ever doubt the importance of what you have built." "I do not," Marcus assured her. "Every day I wake up grateful for the life we have. Good, because there will be harder times ahead. There always are, but you and Henna have shown us how to face them together." She paused, her eyes distant. "I was young during the war. I saw terrible things, did terrible things. I never thought I would live to see humans and orcs working side by side, raising children together, building a future as partners. You have given me hope for my people's future. Thank you for that." Marcus felt the weight of her words, the responsibility they carried, but he also felt pride. He and Henna had set out to solve a water problem, and in doing so they had helped heal a fractured community. It was not a small thing. As the evening wore on and the guests gradually departed, Marcus and Henna found themselves alone on their porch, Zara asleep inside, the valley quiet around them. They sat close together, Henna's head resting on Marcus's shoulder, their fingers intertwined. 10 years, Henna murmured. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean. You ever think about that first day, when I declared us blood-bound?" "Sometimes." Marcus smiled in the darkness. "I thought you were strange, beautiful but strange," she laughed softly. "I thought you were kind, sad maybe, but kind, and I wanted to know you better, wanted to find out what lay beneath that quiet exterior." "And did you find out?" "I did. I found a man of deep loyalty and deeper love, a man who shows his feelings through actions rather than words, a man who makes me feel safe and cherished every single day." She lifted her head to look at him. "I found my home, Marcus, in you." He cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw just as he had done so many times before. "You are my home too. Everything good in my life began the day you let me pull that splinter from your hand." They kissed, soft and sweet and full of 10 years of love and partnership, and Marcus thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. A tiny piece of wood, a made-up ritual, a leap of faith, and everything had changed. He had gone from lonely farmer to husband, father, community leader, bridge between worlds. And he had done it all beside the orc woman who had decided on a whim to declare them kin. The blood bond, invented or not, was the realest thing in his life. It had shaped everything that came after, had guided every choice and every action. And Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he would honor it for the rest of his days, would stand beside Henna through whatever came, would continue building the future they had envisioned together. As they sat together in the quiet night, the shared water system humming softly in the distance, the valley peaceful around them, Marcus allowed himself to feel complete satisfaction. They had built something good and true and lasting. They had created a home, a family, a community that worked. And it all traced back to that first moment of connection, when he had looked at an orc woman's injured hand and decided to help. The simplest acts, Marcus had learned, could change the world. Kindness could bridge divides. Love could transform fear into hope. And sometimes, pulling a splinter from someone's palm was the beginning of everything that mattered. He held Henna close, felt her heartbeat against his chest, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Blood bound and heart bound and soul bound, now and always, until the end of their days. In the house behind them, Zara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something incomprehensible before settling again. Their daughter, their future, living proof that different peoples could come together and create something beautiful. Marcus thought about the world she would grow up in, a world where orc-human cooperation was normal, where the old hatreds were fading into history, where bridges were stronger than walls. They had given her that world, he and Henna had built it piece by piece, starting with a shared water system and expanding outward until it encompassed an entire community. It was not perfect, no human creation ever was, but it was good, and it was theirs, and it would endure. "Come to bed," Henna said softly, standing and pulling him to his feet. "Tomorrow is another day and we have work to do." Always work, Marcus thought, but it was work he loved, work that mattered. He followed his wife into their home, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her room, the farm quiet around them, and he felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The man had pulled a splinter from the orc woman's palm, and she had declared them blood bound by her law. It had been the beginning of everything, of love, of partnership, of peace, of hope. And as Marcus lay down beside Henna in the bed they shared, in the house they had built together, in the valley they had helped unite, he knew that he would never regret the choice he had made that day by the fence line. He had chosen connection over isolation, had chosen to help rather than turn away, had chosen to honor a strange ritual invented by a lonely water warden looking for an excuse to see him again. And those choices had given him everything worth having. The blood bond was real. Not because of ancient tradition or sacred law, but because two people had decided to make it real, had lived it every day, had proved through their actions that chosen family could be as strong as blood family, that bridges could be built between any divide, that love was the most powerful force in any world. Marcus pulled Henna closer, felt her settle against him with the easy comfort of long familiarity, and let his eyes drift closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to strengthen the community they had helped create, new chances to prove that peace was possible. But tonight, he was simply a man lying beside the woman he loved, grateful for every moment of the life they shared. The splinter was long gone, pulled free and discarded years ago. But the scar it left remained on Henna's palm, a tiny white line that matched the one on Marcus's hand from the wedding ritual. Those scars were their bond made visible, their connection marked permanently on their skin, And every time Marcus saw that scar, he remembered the moment everything began. The moment he chose kindness over indifference. The moment Henna chose connection over solitude. The moment two lonely people reached out across the divide and decided to build something together. That moment had changed everything. Had created love and family and peace and hope. Had proved that the smallest actions could have the largest consequences. That choosing to care about someone else's pain was the first step toward changing the world. Marcus drifted toward sleep with Henna warm beside him and Zara breathing softly in the next room, and the valley peaceful outside their windows. He had never imagined his life would turn out this way, had never dreamed he would be a bridge between peoples, or a symbol of hope, or anything beyond a simple farmer working his land. But he had pulled a splinter from an orc woman's palm, and she had declared them blood bound by her law. And everything that came after, all the love and joy and purpose and meaning, had flowed from that one small act of kindness. It was, Marcus thought as sleep finally claimed him, the best thing he had ever done, the choice that had mattered most, the moment that defined his life. And he would make the same choice again, every single time, forever.